Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Nicholas Castman. I'm one of the Vice Presidents at BizNow Media, and it's a pleasure to have you all here today with Gardner and Theobald. Now, we're here this morning to learn all about mass timber commercial developments, what you need to know. A bit of a background into Gardner and Theobald, who have been the lead brand behind this discussion and really the thought leader behind the topic. They are an independent property and construction consultancy working across really all sectors within the built environment. They specialize in cost and project management services. Over the past 12 months, G&T have brought together experts from across the industry to debate the challenges faced when building with mass timber on commercial developments, a very interesting and pertinent topic right now. The team is here today to run through the key findings from these panel discussions and highlight the considerations that are needed if you decide to use mass timber on your next development. I want to take a minute to introduce you to the speakers and the leaders from G&T who are going to inform us today. Oliver Booth, partner at Gardner and Theobald. Oliver has been involved in a variety of exciting projects in over a decade at Gardner and Theobald. Particular interest in the commercial market, Oliver has spent the last 2 years learning and understanding mass timber construction through his position on the Timber Research and Development Association Board and the Structural Timber Association's industry think tank. He's involved in a variety of large-scale developments using his technology. Jess Pennell, Associate Director at Gardner and Theobald. Jess has experience across a variety of different projects in London, including office fit-out, mixed-use master plans, and refurbishment. She helped coordinate G&T's Mash Timber Forum to help share knowledge and information. She's a BCO Next Gen member and a contributor to the BCO specification for officers 2019. She is passionate about sustainable development as part of their G&T Next Gen group. Matt Holman, partner at Gardner and Theobald. Matt is a G&T board member and his day-to-day role acts on behalf of developers, tenants, and owner-occupiers. His experience covers a diverse range of projects within the commercial, retail, residential, leisure, and hospitality sectors. Over the past 12 months, Matt has chaired G&T's Mass Timber Office Forum, championed collaboration and shared knowledge across the industry. And last but not least, Jack Lewis, graduate surveyor at Gardner and Theobald. Jack is a G&T graduate and a member of the firm's Next Gen program, driving forward the future of the business. Over the course of his career so far, Jack has worked on multiple projects through different phases of their developments, including the fit out of commercial offices, achieving BREEAM, WELL, and Passivus accreditations. He's also helped to coordinate G&T's Mass Timber Forum to help educate the industry and aid in breaking down the barriers to further uptake of mass timber. Now, before we start, I would flag that the presentation will run till 8:45. There'll be a Q&A at the end. Please feel free to engage, put your questions on the channel. I will then ask them to the panelists, and it's much more interesting when we have engagement. And without any further ado, over to the wonderful G&T team.
Thanks very much, Nick. And welcome everybody to our Mass Timber Forum. This is the concluding session of what has been quite a journey for us. My name is Matt Holman, a partner in the G&T business, and I've been delighted to chair all the sessions we've held over the course of the last year, and quite a year it's been. The purpose of today is to introduce the forum to you if you haven't been aware of it, and not attended in our webinar sessions, nor seen in any of our recorded sessions, or indeed the summary reports that we produced as a result of the forum. If you have been part of the forum, we hope you'll find it a useful summary and conclusion to the series. Our main aim is to provide you with a summary of the background of the forum, and whilst we clearly do not have time to run through every single discussion point from over 10 hours of sessions we've conducted, we wanted to relay our key findings, present some of our most interesting poll results, provide you with an update since the sessions have been held, present some of the key outcomes, and offer a chance for any further questions. And as Nick said, in respect to questions, please do engage and use the function on the screen to type in your questions, and hopefully we'll have a chance to answer them all at the end of the session. Okay, so first of all, we thought we'd start with our slide that's our stakeholder slide. We thought it'd be a good start to start from the beginning. We've been asked by a number of development clients to organise the forum way back when, and to shape the sessions and consider how various barriers to market, we formulated this stakeholder diagram. The sessions have either engaged directly with such stakeholders or addressed them as part of the sessions. Key barriers you'll probably be aware of relate to insurance, fire, and testing, but as the diagram outlines, and as the forum reviewed, there is much more to mass timber than that. And as ever, when you look at the risks and constraints of something, you also start to identify the opportunities and capacity available in what is a mature, highly engineered and sophisticated market that requires experience, competence, and knowledge. To be absolutely clear, we are talking about managed sustainable forestry here, not the opportunistic clearance of rainforests and threatening habitats of endangered species and the like. A key underlying principle of the whole series has been sustainability, net zero carbon, and the drive to help address the climate emergency the planet is facing. So hopefully on the screen here, the stakeholder diagram shows you the various aspects that we've been touching on throughout the whole of the series. And if you want to get into any detail on those points, then we can link you in with the various recordings and reports. But it's been quite a journey. So over to Ollie to take us through the background to the forum.
Thanks, Matt, and good morning, everyone. Having mapped out all of the stakeholders, as we've shown in the map before, and captured the industry in our diagram, we began grouping the stakeholders into 9 key group discussions. Our goal was to tackle the issues head on and give our developers access to experts in these virtual roundtable discussions in order to better understand the considerations and challenges from inception stage through to completion for mass timber hybrid buildings. The key topics we identified and became the following sessions are as follows. Session 1, insurance. Obtaining insurance for mass timber hybrid projects can be a challenge, both during construction and post-construction. However, we have and continue to see large projects being built. So how do the insurers decide what they want and how do they decide what they don't want to insure? We asked the underwriters, the risk assessors, and the brokers how they approach assessing risks on mass timber hybrid buildings and what can be done to get the required insurance and lower premiums generally. This was a fascinating insight into the insurance world, a world that construction and property industry relies heavily on. We were so grateful to Aviva, AXA and Zurich and our brokers for getting us off to a really positive start. Session 2, fire. Now, fire is always a major concern with all buildings, and nothing should ever be compromised in making our buildings safe from fire. Therefore, we assembled some of the most respected fire engineers, academics, and building control specialists to discuss the topic. We're also really grateful to London Fire Brigade for listening in and being so receptive to the conversation. Session 3, sustainability. We were asked by several of the large developers on the group to bring the sustainability session forward. Such was the interest in this subject. The polls certainly seem to confirm that the drive to build mass timber hybrid project buildings is driven by sustainability, wellness and biodiversity, and getting to the uncompromising global goal of net carbon zero. Our panel of sustainability experts really energized the collective forum and helped us focus on why so many developers want to add timber buildings to their portfolios. Session 4, best practice in construction. In this session, we asked our builders from their experience to outline the pros, cons and challenges when constructing our mass timber hybrid commercial office buildings. Water ingress and fire were key topics, but the message was one of enthusiasm and positivity. On to session 5, cost, program and procurement. G&T delivered session 5 on cost, program and procurement just before Christmas. We discussed the construction cost considerations, a different approach to estimating, how to procure mass timber projects, lead-in times, sequencing, and the effect on construction programs generally. We will continue to benchmark this information, provide updates if the developers would like us to come and speak with them about this. Session 6, capacity and supply chain. We thought a session with the suppliers and subcontractors who manufacture, transport and install mass timber and hybrid structures should be imperative and would be imperative to the forum, as engagement with the supply chain from the outset is critical to delivering off-site manufacture and modern methods of construction. There were great illustrations of how huge an industry the mass timber world is and how considerate it is to sustainable forestry. Session 7, structure, MEP and acoustics. In this session, we spoke to some of the most experienced, knowledgeable structural and MEP engineers from leading firms, along with considering the impact of acoustics. Our expert panel used their extensive experience and learnings to help the forum understand how a mass timber frame may perform in a different way to more traditional construction frame types. Session 8, leasing and sales. Our penultimate topic was with several well-known global commercial agents and client representatives on what funders, developers, tenants, and end users are looking for in a pre-post-pandemic commercial office world. This session provided a fascinating insight into why there is a growing appetite for more mass timber hybrid commercial office buildings amongst our developers. And finally, session 9, architecture and design. To our creative designers continually pushing the boundaries and adopting innovative and sustainable materials into their design. We heard from several renowned architects who have been responsible for designing all sorts of mass timber commercial office buildings, not only in the UK, but globally. And now to Jess, who will tell us more about the key findings on these panel discussions.
Over the past 12 months, we've brought together over 60 experts across 10 panel discussions to discuss some of the opportunities and key challenges faced by the industry in relation to mass timber in commercial buildings. Throughout the discussions, 4 key areas of interest were consistently highlighted by the panels. The first of which is sustainability and well-being. One of the key themes was the association between mass timber and sustainability, and how the material could assist the built environment reach the net zero goal by 2030. As a renewable resource, timber is believed to be a truly renewable, sustainable construction material. We heard from the sustainability panel discussions about the advantages of timber's carbon capture, low weight, reduced time and cost when transporting the material to site, and its prefabrication potential, enabling shorter construction times. In many of the sessions, the health and well-being qualities of timber were also a focus of the discussions, with panelists pointing to research studies that show increased feelings of occupant well-being when spending time in a timber building. During the sales and leasing panel, the panelists agreed that many occupiers are looking for best-in-class buildings and were willing to pay a premium for buildings constructed out of timber. Corporations that are looking to achieve net zero as one of their key business objectives are also looking to timber frame buildings. It was also noted that mass timber buildings tend to be leased quicker, attract more attention from financial institutions, and receive very competitive funding arrangements from banks. So moving on to collaboration and expertise. Throughout the forum, it was highlighted by several panelists that it's key to assemble a skilled and competent team with the right knowledge and experience. This, coupled with early engagement with the supply chain, helps to ensure high-performing mass timber buildings. From the opening discussions between the insurance industry experts to the suppliers, the main contractors, and the engineering panels, we discovered that currently knowledge sits in silos across a wide range of experts and stakeholders. So greater collaboration at the earliest stages of the project is necessary to arrive at a well-designed and viable project. It was felt that greater transparency and knowledge sharing across the industry would help break down some of the barriers to the use of mass timber, particularly from the insurance market, who indicated early engagement and collaboration with brokers could demonstrate an improved risk profile leading to reduced premiums. The growth of green leases is leaning to more interdependence between occupiers and investors and owners of buildings, as they act to ensure that specific environmental targets are maintained during the occupation, leading to a requirement for greater collaboration, information sharing, and data collection from building management systems. It was highlighted by the fire engineers and the building control panel the need to collaborate with the fire brigade from the early stages of design to work out potential issues. It was also suggested that peer review should be undertaken during the design process, involving multiple dialogues between key stakeholders. It should be noted, however, early engagement with a wide variety of experts may result in additional consultancy fees, higher preliminary costs, and a cost premium on mass timber projects. This is all to be balanced against the benefits of good planning and strong team relationship that can save time and lead to better overall design. Then regulation, standards and testing is our third key theme. The lack of clear guidance and regulation in respect of timber construction was highlighted as a significant barrier in the uptake across the sector. The lack of shared testing data and the importance of standardized testing programs was also noted across many of the panel discussions. In the UK, we don't have vast experience in evaluating risk premiums for mass timber buildings, and insurers are data-driven. Insurers assess risk based on experience and data wherever possible. But where there is insufficient data, it's difficult to establish trends and set regulations and standards leading to premiums being applied. Our panelists said that an agreed code of practice incorporating design and risk mitigation requirements would help owners, developers and insurers alike looking to build and insure mass timber buildings. At the same time, they did note that there is an increasing amount of guidance becoming available. For example, the Structural Timber Association's best practice notes, and from a fire perspective, the Joint Code of Practice on the protection of fire on construction sites. It was also generally agreed that increased regulation in the form of government policy, incentives, updated BCO standards, and assessment methods would be pivotal in bringing about a step change and accelerating the adoption of mass timber. Currently, test data ownership is spread across the STA, TRADA, and the TTF, which leads to a disparate source of responsibility and information. There have been over 30 compartment tests where some degree of CLT has been exposed, but these are generally limited in scope. The STA are now conducting an extensive review on the current mass timber testing methods and is expanding the scope and scale of testing regimes in order to improve the depth and quality of publicly available information. The STA has produced a 16-point guide on the steps to fire safety, which outlines how to manage fire of mass timber project buildings. Generally, there was a suggestion that there is a lack of test data, and more publicly available test data will be key to unlocking some of the barriers to the use of mass timber, enabling the creation of better guidance and optimized designs. It was suggested that those providing off-site mass timber testing should form part of the project team, providing advice on water ingress, durability, fire, and also embodied carbon. Testing needs to be completed early in the programme in order to help de-risk both the design and approvals process. And then finally, hybrid development and construction methods is our fourth key theme. Over the 10 forum sessions, panelists debated the pros and cons of hybrid construction. Often it was noted that a hybrid structural solution of mass timber combined with more conventional materials could be the solution to many of the challenges faced at the pre-construction phase of the development. Panelists agreed hybrid solutions should always be explored to balance the sustainability aspirations with some of the commercial sensitivities. It was particularly highlighted by the insurance panel that hybrid solutions can help lower insurance premiums. It was also noted that hybrid solutions do present some challenges, particularly around interfaces and specification of products and materials. Some of these findings were also supported by the results from the poll sessions that we ran live on our panel discussions, which Jack will now take us through a few of.
Thanks, Jeff.
Just a reminder, Jack, before you kick it, just a reminder to use your question, your chat function to get the questions in for at the end. Go on, Jack, carry on.
No worries. As Jeff has said, I'll now take you through a few of the results from the live audience polls. We've picked out a selection to show you today that we hope you'll find interesting. The first one we're talking about is important that during the forum series, we investigated the key driver behind the desire to build with mass timber. The following poll result came from our cost, procurement and program forum, in which we asked the audience for their main driver behind utilizing mass timber on their projects. As you can see, the main drivers with over 77% of the vote are for sustainability and carbon, followed by a further 11% for health and well-being. This shows that developers and owners are focused on achieving a greater sustainability credentials and wish to reduce their project's impact on the environment to meet their sustainability goals. An interesting thing to note on this poll is that also the importance of the health and well-being as a key driver. Studies have proven that there is a link between working in a building made of more natural materials, shown to aid in a reduction of stress levels and improve cognitive abilities. Landlords and developers want to encourage occupiers to take their spaces and finding they can do this through using a more natural material such as timber. Moving on to the challenges and viability. It was noted early on within our series that cost would be thought to be a barrier to utilising mass timber. However, as you can see from the poll result on screen, when we asked the attendees to give their view on whether mass timber's sustainability credentials outweighed their concerns around cost and viability, the audience responded with an outstanding yes. They do believe that sustainability credentials outweigh the concerns that they have in relation to cost. This poll was discussed during our sustainability panel, and it was understood that to be truly sustainable, mass timber needs to hit all three pillars of sustainability. These pillars are environmental, social, and economical. And although there is a perceived premium to utilising mass timber, the cost can be very competitive through the increased opportunity to manufacture off-site, which can allow for a reduced construction time, resulting in lower overheads. Throughout the series, we have discussed and debated many challenges that can be faced with using mass timber. Over the years, I'm sure that you've seen a few of these, Matt.
Absolutely. I mean, I love some of the quotes we got on the presentation here. So it's quite simple sometimes as well. And you just give timber a big hat and a solid pair of boots and it'll be fine. Those sort of things are great. And I might just add, actually, I forgot to say at the start, I love the holding music, by the way, when we were just starting the presentation. Knock on wood. Anyway, carry on, Jack.
Thanks. Another key response from the audience came during the fire testing and building control panel. This highlighted that the audience belief, with a majority of 86%, that mass timber needs a dedicated standard to be adopted and taken forward urgently. 100% of the live forum audience believe that these standards will be needed within the next 3 to 5 years. It is worth noting that there's a further discussion on this poll result during the session, and it was highlighted that in order to ensure this standard is developed correctly, a collective approach is going to be required to fund and publish the necessary large-scale research for this development. The panel believed that a collaborative, supplier-led and funded testing approach to this research and development is the way forward, as this would then allow for an impartial and independent oversight of the research by a group of stakeholders such as fire engineers, fire service and other interested parties. Lastly, this poll was taken during the cost, programme and procurement panel discussion, and we believe that it's an extremely significant result in the course of the series. We asked the audience whether they would collaborate in order to fund a bespoke testing programme for mass timber. The importance of this testing programme was noted across many of our panels and highlighted both Jess in the key findings section earlier and also in the previous poll result on standards and guides. This programme and data collected could help encourage the wider use of mass timber across the market by speeding up and reducing the risk of design and approval process by helping to shape a dedicated standard for the material. As you can see from the results, the findings of this poll were one of our most significant, with 95% of the audience willing to consider collaboration on such a programme. This response highlights the common interest to help unlock and remove the remaining barriers of the uptake of mass timber. The desire for collaboration that we can see in this result has been a common thread throughout the whole series and has since been shown through a variety of new groups and think tanks between different stakeholders that have been created as a result of discussions within this forum. Ollie will take us through some of these now.
Thanks, Jack, and some fascinating poll outcomes and results there, and have been certainly a useful tool throughout the forum, I must admit. Following the success of the forum, we wanted to provide you all with some updates as we move forward, having concluded this particular series. So first of all, there is now an insurance working group. This is led by Dominic Lyon of Gallagher's, which is an insurance working group that's been set up with representatives of large insurers, reinsurers, brokers, risk assessors, actuaries, and various other key decision makers in the insurance world.
It's worth noting, Ollie, isn't it? I think, or just in terms of insurance, that was our first session, really, wasn't it? And it's worth noting that if people really want to get into the detailed insurance, it's really worth accessing that report and that video of that session, because there's so many aspects to it, both in the construction element and in the built environment, sort of post construction, if you like. So it's really worth looking at.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and also I would say on that we all know insurance is incredibly important in our lives in different ways, and none more so than in the construction and property industry. And we talk about it, but I think it's what the stakeholder map really kind of identifies, is that there's lots of silos, there's lots of stakeholders, but perhaps we're not always joined up, and perhaps we could be more joined up as different industries and discuss these things more closely and help each other out. Because I think dissemination.
Yeah. One of the key bits that come out of that was knowledge, wasn't it? That if we help educate the insurance market, and that's not trying to say that they're obviously bright people, but if you help educate them, then the more knowledge they've got, the easier it is for them to understand the products and what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. I mean, and there were elements of them also educating us, I think, as well, wasn't there, Matt, with their estimated maximum loss and how they get to that, why they treat timber buildings different, and a lot of that's about research, data, and testing. It just so happens that there haven't been many mass timber buildings that have burnt down, or that have had problems, and therefore that data isn't available. So lots of learnings for us as well, I think, both ways. So I agree. I mean, and also just going back to the insurance working group, the working group are now looking at drafting a joint code of practice and a guidance document on considering and considerations for insuring mass timber hybrid buildings, which will really help the insurance industry at all different levels to treat different projects and look at them perhaps in a different way, and also equally for us to feed information into them to help them assess the risks in different ways. It's a two-way process. This group will meet at quarterly intervals to discuss any barriers to offering insurance on mass timber buildings, and G&T have been invited to come and contribute to that. So we're very pleased to be involved in that, and as well as increasing the dissemination of information and education throughout this incredibly fundamental stakeholder group. In terms of testing, fire testing continues to progress, as Jess touched on earlier. Examples of this are the ongoing testing by the Structural Timber Associations, the STA's special interest group. And I do encourage you to refer to the STA's website for more information on this, because it's really well documented in there with some good footage as well. There are also ongoing tests by the BRE, and results are hopefully expected later this year. There are also testing by reputable fire engineers, academics and private testing organisations all over the world, from Central Europe to Scandinavia, to Canada, Australia. So that's really pleasing as well. And of course, many of our developers who are already on with their developments are doing specific project testing and considering their own individual projects. And hopefully this information through that collaboration, which Jack talked about earlier, will help that be shared, and hopefully we'll get a more consistent message generally, which should help unlock some of these issues.
That's spot on, Ollie. I mean, in terms of the testing part, I mean, the main element there is obviously data. Data drives design and thinking and decisions, etc. The more that can be pulled, the tested data being pulled together, it would be awesome, really, because that collaboration can then really kick on.
Yeah, absolutely. And this testing and research continues to take place, and they're looking at all sorts of issues and trying to, get to a final consistent answer in terms of, self-extinguishment, charring rates, delamination, the travel and speed of fire, how different connections respond, what difference encapsulation makes on, and so on. So they really are testing everything. And as further testing takes place and the experts review and conclude their findings, we hope that knowledge and understanding will naturally increase. And I think, just again to highlight in session 2, the importance of third-party peer reviews. And perhaps, peer reviews are a good thing across the industry. Just that extra pair of eyes. It doesn't need to be a negative thing. It's a positive thing. Matt, I know you're a big champion of, third-party.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really supports building control as well. I mean, you're giving them another string to their bow, really, to really help them have confidence in what's being engineered. And I think it's absolutely essential, as was discussed in that session, Ollie. Yeah,
and hopefully the plan is that we'll make our timber buildings even safer than they already are. And who knows, perhaps our timber buildings of the future, because of so much scrutiny, so much testing, research and data, may be the safest that in the industry, and a best in class and a benchmark going forward as well. And then moving on to the BCO, so really pleased and welcome the representatives of the BCO that have been listening in throughout the forum. And Jess Pennell is G&T's, one of G&T's conduits and links to them, and she'll be picking up with them to discuss findings and potential future updates on information on mass timber hybrid office buildings. And just again, a big thank you now to the STA, the Structural Timber Association, and TRADA and the TTF. We were thrilled to have all of these associations listening to the forum. They really do champion industry and they do reflect them well, and they've been so supportive with the forum, and they've been actively picking up actions that have come out of the sessions, publishing articles and helping us take these issues forward. So it's not just finding problems, we're finding solutions. So a big thank you to them as well. And now we just move on to section 5, which is kind of an extension of this, but it's more about outcomes as well that have come from the forum. We now have a mass timber know-how group, which was set up by Mary Lederman of Lend-Lease, which we really appreciate. And it's a really good idea. It was basically, the idea was picking a key decision maker in all of those stakeholder groups, which our map at the beginning illustrated. We now meet on a monthly basis. There are all sorts involved, from clients to insurers to engineers to architects to suppliers to subcontractors. Literally everybody in that group is in there. One representative from each to take it back to their industry and respond to anything that comes up, highlighting issues from the forum, anything that comes to light, and planning a strategy to overcome these issues. And this group is instrumental into rectifying any blockers and barriers that might be preventing the uptake of mass timber and hybrid buildings generally. Next to the Timber Accelerator Hub, so Simon Corby, a big thank you to him. He helped bring the forum to the attention of the Louders Foundation. The foundation subsequently provided a grant to support the Timber Accelerator Hub, or the TAH, which is helping to increase the uptake of timber construction because of its sustainable credentials and significant contribution to reducing carbon. We'd also like to welcome Joe Giddings, who is the newly appointed Projects and Campaigns Director at the TAH. And in terms of developer collaboration, I mean, Matt, you've seen this firsthand in a lot of your meetings lately. We were discussing it the other day. So many of them that have been invited to the forum are now meeting themselves to collaborate, share, discuss their findings, and such an important momentum and better knowledge coming from the client down, because if the client wants something, then it will ripple throughout the industry.
Which for us, Ollie, I mean, of all the outcomes and stuff that's coming out of the forum, the fact that we've got our developer clients talking to one another in more detail about such topics is just fantastic, because actually helping one another is quite awesome, actually.
I completely agree. And in terms of testing, research and knowledge, most of the testing is focused around fire. But in actual, there are, water ingress, some of the kind of typical details that are now being produced by the subcontractors and the suppliers. That's things like that are getting better and more advanced. There will be more research and knowledge which is planned across the mass timber industry. And as we report these findings and we all learn collectively, we will strive towards best practice, consistency, and I believe even better mass timber buildings. So yeah, look, really pleased, and this is the tip of the iceberg. I think this will grow and grow, and we may be talking in a few years' time from now, and mass timber buildings will and hybrid buildings will be commonplace. So that's it from me, really, Matt, in terms of updates and outcomes.
Cheers, Ollie. We're good for time as well, so we've got plenty of time for questions. So thank you, team, for the summary and the update, and a big thank you all. Obviously, it's a good chance to get it in now. Big chance to say thank you to all the contributors and panelists that have made the series such an overwhelming success. We've really enjoyed it, and I know that they did. And if we did an outtake session, it'd be quite amusing, actually, but we won't go there. Thank you all also for the attendees at the sessions, for their support, encouragement and feedback. The engagement at the sessions was brilliant, and the questions helped shape each and every session, so it was great. I guess to say now, I'm delighted to say our white paper is now ready for publication, and indeed you'll all be given a link to that after this session. So that will be hopefully a really useful summary report to all of the reports that we've produced for all of the sessions to date. And lastly, before we get into the Q&A, there are some key words I've written down as we've gone through here, and you'll pick out from our white paper, just to be at the forefront of your minds when considering timber. Things like early engagement, competence, collaboration, I think has come through very strongly. Expertise, naturally, peer reviews, the increase in knowledge. This not only helps the consultants, but helps the insurers and the regulators, as we were saying earlier. The pooling of test data is really important. The need for consistency and guidance in testing. Tenants, landlords, developers and funders have common desires, well-being and meeting corporate requirements to deliver environmentally and economically sustainable real estate. And one that's come out from a technical aspect for us, naturally we're interested in that element from a cost and project management perspective, is hybrid. Hybrid construction has been many of the conclusions to many of the sessions we've had of, it's not all about mass timber, but if you can get an element of hybrid in there, it normally unlocks a lot of things, whether it be from an insurance perspective, a fire perspective, or simply might even be a span perspective, achieving spans on floor plates and reducing the grid on the project. So Nick, that's our presentation. We're ahead of schedule, so hopefully that means we can have more questions. So over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so a couple of questions that popped up from the audience. First things first, from Stuart Le Boltier, when do you expect the standard for mass timber to be brought to the market?
Well, I mean, the issue there, Stuart, is that there are a number of, what we've tried to do is collaborate, get people together to work out what is needed. Now, there are a number of testing houses, there are a number of regulators, there's clearly standards that have been achieved from BCI, and what we're trying to do is bring them all together. Now, in terms of a simple answer to that, I don't think there is one. Ollie, I don't know if you've got anything you wanted to say in terms of that, but...
Yeah, I think you're right, Matt. I mean, it's a constant evolution, and it's getting faster and faster and more comprehensive as we go forward. I mean, the big issues at the moment, as we've touched on, seem to be around fire and water ingress, and they have an intrinsic link with insurance. So there is more to be done, but it is moving very, very quickly. I mean, and you could argue that standards are changing for our buildings generally anyway, all the time. It's not something that just ends. It's something that is continual as we kind of strive towards best in class. So I think it's something that will continue. It is getting better, and watch this space, I think.
I mean, at the end of the day, the regulations are the regulations. They will not injure or kill anyone in a building, quite clearly. But how we go about achieving that is a lot of it is driven by the test data and making sure that we have that knowledge and in-house capability for the engineering experts to design something that is going to meet the standards. And it's bringing building control along with that process. Now, there are some building control people out there that are getting a good base of knowledge in this area, and they're supported through expert engineering companies and indeed academics. So there's some academic support as well, and that goes back to our peer review comment earlier.
So next up, this is more of a, I guess, a point of view that I think we'd like everyone's input on. But Rico says he represents almost 1,000 builders, and he said very few members put cost seconds, trying to encourage more timber use, but particularly in recent times, cost is playing a huge part in not using timber, and prices are not going to drop. So, I mean, Team G&T, do you have a solution, and what are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question to ask a project and cost management firm, isn't it? Ollie, do you want to pick up on the cost bit, and I'll pick up on the wider piece?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Matt. I mean, I think generally what we're starting to see at the moment is a trend generally that inflation seems to be coming as we're moving towards, hopefully, as it's reported in the press, perhaps some sort of boom in the next 6 to 12 months, which is probably what we all need after this pandemic. So I think it's really important to keep our eye on inflation and to keep updating, and that's we are continuing to do that as things progress. I think there's this whole question of cost, and I think the government can help with that, and organisations like the GLA, for instance, they have a carbon offset tax. So perhaps tax is a really good way to whilst the construction cost might be higher, might be the same or might be higher, there are other ways of incentivizing people to adopt it, because let's face it, we are all acutely aware of the climate crisis. The RIBA have declared their declaration on climate crisis, and so have lots of other big organizations. So we need to help incentivize the uptake of using materials that do lower carbon. So I think that will help. It's a bit of 6 of one, half a dozen the other. So what might be more expensive in the capital cost might be a little bit less through kind of incentives. I mean, we've seen what France are doing in terms of mandating the use of 50% of the use in timber in their public buildings going forward. That's government actually stepping in. I saw Bill Gates's interview a month or so ago now, and he was saying, this is just something we've got to do. It might cost us more money to do it, but we've got to adopt more sustainable materials, lots of sustainability measures to lower operational carbon, lower embodied carbon. And the interesting thing with timber is there's the whole sequestered carbon element as well. So I think going back to the agents forum as well, that was really interesting, because they were talking about a wider variety of tenant now wants to be in more sustainable buildings. Biodiversity is driving their needs. End users want to be in healthier buildings. So, again, it's how do you put, I think Rob said it from CBRE in terms of Mark Carney quoting, there's value in values. So, it's sometimes the actual cost of a building as opposed to the value it creates is something else. And we've got to look at that holistically. So I think there's lots of things to be considered, and I think the fact that we're seeing more and more mass timber building, hybrid buildings built, is just an illustration of that we are overcoming that barrier. And it's not just about construction cost; it's a much bigger thing now.
And I'd go back to first principles as well, Nick, whereby if you're applying a timber solution to something that's already built for steel and concrete, the cost sometimes will be higher. But if you start at first principles and look at what timber is more capable of, do you really need that 9 by 12 meter grid? If you reduce that grid size, then the timber will be a more cost-effective solution than otherwise it might be. So it's starting from those first principles, and if you start at those first principles, I think the cost differential will come down, and indeed the product will be different as well.
Gotcha, nice stuff. Another question: have Gardner and Theobald seen a noticeable change, either positive or negative, in live mass timber projects coming to market since the start of the forum?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah, I'll probably go to you first, Matt, because you see submissions land on your desk before us often. And
yeah, well, it's interesting. Certainly, Nick. So at feasibility stage for projects now, I mean, anything that's happened in the, since COVID, if you like, timber is being considered as a method for building a building now, whereas previously, dare I suggest, people were looking at it and said, actually, let's look at it now after it's been designed, and then you're trying to reapply timber to it. So people are actually considering it from first principles now, which is the way to deal with timber, because it's got to be considered right from the off. You've got to take a lot of parties along the journey with you. So yeah, but in terms of specific answering that specific question, absolutely, there's a number of timber projects in London, particularly at the moment. We're involved. We're lucky enough to be involved with a number of them. Ollie, in particular, is involved with a few as well. So yeah, it's definitely.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo exactly what Matt's saying. I mean, the number of submissions that are coming through for maybe for services or project interest, and they set the criteria and the brief aspirations, and in there, aspiration to try and build a timber building. And that doesn't necessarily even need to necessarily be mass timber. There's lots of other, stick frame systems, SIPs. I mean, the winner of the Sterling Prize a couple of years ago, the Goldsmith Road, which achieved passive house, and timber does help you, in terms of it helping you get to those kind of certifications and standards as well. So yeah, we've seen a huge kind of increase in uptake, and it just seems to multiply year on year.
And it's not just timber, Nick. It's timber is one of the elements of a general push towards well-being and sustainability, and timber is one of those facets that can help that. So I mean, the well-being bit was one that's, if you think about it, it's one that surprised us, I think, in terms of how strong people do feel about being in an environment that's got timber. It makes you feel more comfortable for some reason. It's just one of those things. But it's been interesting.
Yeah, well, that's all great to hear. And another interesting question from Chris Jones. Given the drive to start building with timber, what are your thoughts on potential shortage of mass timber in the future? Do you feel the supply chains are set up to accommodate this drive, or is there work to be done?
Well, on the supply chain part, I mean, our session with the supply chain was awe-inspiring. I mean, Ollie and I have been out to see a number of the places in Europe that are manufacturing or felling and manufacturing the products, and it's like a scene out of Terminator. It's like literally there are mass machines everywhere. This is big industry. It is phenomenal. And I think, I can't remember some of the stats. I'm looking at Jack and Jess, if they can remember some of the stats, but some of the stats from that of the capacity is quite awe-inspiring, and that's just in Europe. And then there is also a growth now to starting to look towards the UK producing their own as well. So Ollie, you probably know more in terms of the details on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the kind of the big guys, the KLHs, the Binderholts, the Stora Enso, the Hashlackers, these are big conglomerates that have been around a very, very long time, and it is very sustainable forestry. I mean, you've seen it reported in some of the documentaries that have been on TV recently, but also it was picked up, highlighted in the short video that was on that session which Matt's talking about, that actually we are reforesting, that we are actually growing more trees, and it is good for trees to be sustainably forest for a number of reasons, and replenish. So these businesses are, that everything about their ESG is about being sustainable. So in terms of supply of the actual raw material, this is a very different scenario than cutting down rainforest, as Matt said in his introduction. So there are eyes on this. There are the governments make sure that everything's okay, but the companies themselves, when you go and actually see them and you talk to them, they'll say to you, look, on your particular projects, we want to sell you as little timber as possible. And what they mean by that is they're saying, we want you to design for timber sustainably. We don't want to exhaust this supply, because if we do that, we'll burn out our own industry. So, I do encourage anybody to go on the websites of some of those firms and other big sawmills, and in terms of supply chain from the subcontractors. So if the sawmills and the manufacturers actually create the beams or the columns and the panels, the subcontractors, BKS, Hybrid, Urban, KLH, Hess, Zublin, VHAG, the list goes on. There are lots and lots of people that operate in the UK and globally that are able to supply and install this. And they often use the same engineers that we're using, the same guys that are client side. Our engineers have a wealth of experience of actually not just concept design, but delivery design. So, I think the future is bright in terms of the supply chain. If all our buildings 100% turn timber overnight, that might be a problem, but that's not happened quite yet. And I think, in terms of the market share and the way it's growing, the industry is growing with it, and the supply chain is there to support it.
The bigger issue is probably the expertise to actually design and erect these buildings, not necessarily the supply.
Nice.
Just
and then from
chime in, sorry Nick, just chime in, that stat, Matt, that you're probably referring to is the average growth speed of the forest. So across Finland, Sweden and Austria, the three countries can grow 2.75 meters cubed of wood per second. To put that in terms of an office building of roughly about 5,000 square meters, it could be regrown within about 9 minutes of the Austrian forest, just to give you a size, an understanding of the size and scale of these forests that are available.
And that's just a few of the forests, so thanks, Jack. That's helpful.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying, just picking up again, that, this is predominantly softwood, which is fast growing and very sustainable. We're not talking about unsustainable, types of trees that are endangered in terms of species and stuff like that. So.
Okay. And from Stuart Leboltier again, interesting question. With sustainability being a critical element in today's development, how do we overcome the barrier of architects' PI, creating a challenge for mass timber projects?
In terms of PR, I mean, architects are obviously a lead designer, and they are, you could argue, a key collaborator. I mean, they're the ones at the orchestra at the front there, bringing it all together. So, I mean, in terms of the expertise needed for such projects, I mean, clearly fire engineering is a key aspect, as is structural engineering and the like. I mean, I think that you can make it more complicated than it needs to be. I think that I'll go back to the Tim Snelsden quote of keep it dry, and you'll be all right, because water, particularly in construction, is a big issue. Fire, strangely, is probably the biggest issue in construction, or the fire aspect of a timber building in construction is probably the bigger aspect, rather than when it's actually delivered. So from a PR perspective, I mean, we're not obviously going to be advised on in terms of insurance, but that hasn't really come up during the sessions, Nick, to be honest.
Okay, fair enough. And then from Joe Giddings, Frank, for the great series, well done, obviously, nice plug. Could you speak about any mass timber building success stories that have developed in the year since you've been running this series? And have you seen an increase in mass timber projects coming to you? I think it's always good for people to understand real life case studies. So could you point to any projects you've been working on over the past year that the audience could relate to?
Well, it's probably worth relaying some of the ones that we covered in the agency session, isn't it? Because we put a few of those up on the screen then. So, I mean, clearly we're involved with Google at King's Cross and the like, but there are others, Ollie. You might want to just list them off.
Yeah, I mean, some of them were beginning at the beginning of the forum and have kind of gone on site now. As Matt says, Google, the black and white building for the office group, which is a terrific building, which is going up at the moment over in Shoreditch. In that session, we showed Roots in the Sky by Fabrics, another one of our clients from a project management perspective. There are other examples across the UK that are coming forward. As Pottersfield for John Curran, who's been a big supporter of the forum throughout. That's a private residence in London. We've had interest throughout, really. You probably read in the press, Southwark, the underground station, the development, the AHMM development that's going above that we've been involved in as QS and PM. That's got planning now, which is really, really positive. I know Grosvenor have got big aspirations for a large scheme. There are a ton of ones I'm being careful not to say, because Matt knows we've signed very onerous NDAs, and that is typically something that prevents us from talking about them. But I think you only need to pick up Building Magazine or Estates Gazette and see that so and so developer, well-known developer, but large and small scale developers are adopting mass timber buildings generally. So the proof of the pudding's in the eating, really.
Final final question I have actually is around the asset classes. So are you seeing pickup in terms of using mass timber in certain sectors, for example, like office, more than you do other sectors within industry? And if so, is that the case, and why is that the case?
Well, we've specifically focused on offices for this session, Nick, and indeed it's quite a useful plug. So we might go on to do other asset classes. We've specifically avoided residential for various reasons, but mainly that word beginning with G, until all that sort of sorts itself out. For good reason. So we sort of veered away from that for now, but clearly there's a number of low-rise residential projects out there, all engaging with timber, and it's and we've had a lot of those house builders involved with the office session, actually, because they're interested in the technology aspects of it. So there's clearly those two asset classes. You won't be remiss to say, you go to any sort of sports hall now. We're involved with some fantastic sports facilities ourselves that will have either glulam roofs or whatever it may be, but it covers a multitude of sectors, and I guess the most sensitive ones are where there's sleeping accommodation, hotel and residential, and we're sort of leaving that to one side for now until that element, particularly the inquiry, is over.
Yeah, of course.
I would definitely agree with everything Matt said. I mean, go back kind of pre-combustibles ban and Hackett reports and changes. We were seeing a huge interest in residential hotels. That started to kind of tail off a little bit, as Matt says, as we've been going through this phase of change, good change, change that the industry needs. But what we are actually seeing a massive pickup in that now, and clients going back to that, looking at hotels, looking at student accommodation, looking at residential, and that's kind of where we're thinking that this goes next. But it was easier to start with offices. Offices, wasn't so constrained by changes, and there are lots of built examples. So that was mainly why we fixed there. Matt's had some emails about, from big retail clients as well. They'd be interested. I mean, it was very popular in supermarkets way back when, the Sainsbury's of the world, the Tesco's of the world, lots of glulam structures, different types of glulam. So, that's coming back. We're seeing interest as well from warehouses, some big kind of industrial unit type companies that, they've obviously got a vested interest in getting to net carbon zero, and so that's a good way of doing that as well. So we're seeing it expand in all sorts of different directions, even outdoor structures as well, if you're using the right kind of timber, coyers and whatnot. So it's certainly, we're seeing kind of interest throughout, really.
Right.
Nick, I see as well, there was one there about which countries are leading the way in mass timber development, and I've just seen come up on one of the questions there. That's a good question. We made a point of at the end of every session, we look overseas and look at the international market and see what's going on out there, and we saw a lot of inspiration from the North American market, from the Scandinavian market, and indeed certainly from a production perspective, Germany and Austria seem to be very strong in terms of actually producing the materials. But there are international examples that our architects picked up in the last session as well. Whether it be in Milan, Toronto, there's some fantastic projects out there, and like literally awe-inspiring stuff to really inspire others to take it on.
Nice. Well, look, we could go all morning, but I'm being told by Anya and Laura that we're slightly over time. We've got to be conscious of people's diaries. Just like to say massive thanks to Jess, Jack, Matt, and Oliver. That was fascinating. For all of you that are on the session today, obviously, if you want to find out more, you can contact all the speakers personally. And a huge thank you to you all for taking the time, and we look forward to doing it again soon.
Cheers all.
Thanks all.
Everyone.